Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ryan Schlegel, and today I want to talk to you about log shipping within Microsoft SQL Server 2012. Um, Log shipping is a feature that is present in both standard and enterprise. It's been around for a couple versions now, and log shipping, in my opinion, is probably one of the easiest replication models to set up, and I'll actually walk you through that here in a bit. But what is log shipping? What does it really entail? Well, log shipping, in a nutshell, is really a backup, a copy, and a restore of transaction logs from server A to server B. Um, and why would we do that? We'll talk about some of those use cases here in a minute. Okay. Um, Log shipping is available in both Standard Edition of Microsoft SQL Server 2012 and Enterprise Edition Microsoft SQL Server 2012. If you're not familiar with the difference between standard and enterprise, enterprise is really geared towards the larger organizations. They give you a couple more options as far as more real-time type approaches, bidirectional, master type models. Some online maintenance type capabilities. Things that are really geared for minimal downtime. In the event of maintenance or even failures, that sort of thing. Okay, we're going to stay away from enterprise for now. We're going to focus solely on standard, because standard is what I would say more organization use than enterprise, regardless. So, what are some of the key differences in log shipping compared to other Microsoft SQL Server replication technologies? Well, the first one is that log shipping is interval based. It is not in near real time. If you need near real time replication, this is not for you. Log shipping is not real time. It is interval, but it has its use cases. Whenever you sit down with whether it's your owner, if you're a small organization, or your business partners or business units, depending on how large of an organization you have, one of the conversations you need to have with them is around RTO and RPO. Recovery time objective is how soon can I get the service back up and operational, but the RPO is recovery point objective, which means at what point can I recover your data to? So as an example, if not to get too far down that path, but just to kind of touch on it a little bit, if you've got, let's just call it disaster recovery. If you've got a scenario where you're replicating data from point A to point B, and point A goes down, how fast can you get the server and the data up and operational on server B or server A, depending on what your recovery model is? But how soon can you actually get that back up? So let's just pretend it's, I don't know, this is a bad example, but let's just say it takes you 12 hours. Hopefully it takes you a lot less than that, but let's just pretend it takes you 12 hours to get that server back up and operational and the data restored so that you can continue to service requests. RPO, on the other hand, is more around your backup model or even your replication model, is how much data did you lose? At what point, remember RPO, point, recovery point objective, what point of the day is your data good to? So let's just say you're doing backups every 6 hours. Well, if you just had a backup and your server died right before your next backup, you would have to go back. You would have lost 6 hours worth of data, right? So those are bigger conversations to have with your organization, but just to kind of touch on that a little bit, that's what that is. And there's a ton of information on the internet around recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives. So I strongly recommend that you go ahead and do a little bit of research on those topics, and if you're not familiar with them, it'll be a little bit of an eye opener. It's definitely a good exercise to make sure you exercise when you within your organization. So the next thing is the next key difference between log shipping and other SQL Server replication technologies is that log shipping can incorporate many subscribers. So it's a one-to-many type offering, which is not available in all replication. Some replication solutions have a primary and a secondary. That's it. Others can scale very well, such as log shipping. So you can have what we refer to as one publisher, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then you can have multiple subscribers. And again, we'll talk about that terminology, that methodology here in a minute. And the last thing is that last key difference between log shipping and other replication technologies for Microsoft SQL Server is really around readability of that secondary, that passive database. We're busy replicating this data. Is it available for reads on the secondary instance? This is where a common use case for this is where you need to scale out. And what does scale out means? It means you'd have to look up the technical definition, but my definition of scale out is where you take an instance of one thing, in our case it's going to be a database, and you duplicate it, right? You basically take that and you get it out for other operations. Okay, here's a prime example. So you work for a large, and this is a very common, you probably hear this again on the internet, a lot of people use this example, but let's pretend like you work for a large organization and you manage, you sell products online. And you've got an application front end with a shopping cart where people can log in with their account, they can choose products, and they can put them in their cart, and they can hit purchase, and all of that data gets saved to a back-end database to ultimately be fulfilled and then shipped off to them, within a short period of time. But you've also got a large sales organization. Okay, so now you've got your web application on the front end that is servicing all of these sales and saving all this data to a SQL database. But then Monday morning, all of your sales folks come in. Maybe they focus on large corporations or something like that, where maybe a web interface doesn't make sense, and they'll come in and they want to run their reports. What were their sales last week? What were their sales last month? And what were their sales last year? Those, which are typically read operations, that type of read operations can be heavy, and it sometimes, depending on the scenario, will put locks on the database. And so some DBAs, what they choose to do is if they find that read activity from all the sales individuals coming in Monday morning looking for all their statistics and their sales info, is putting a load, unnecessary load, arguably, on the primary database that's also servicing your sales front end application, they may choose to quote unquote scale out. And log shipping is great for that. So basically what we can do is we can spin up another SQL server. We can establish log shipping, which we'll walk through here in just a couple minutes, and we will replicate that data on an interval. So if we know that reports that the sales individuals are looking for are not real-time information, they're looking for more historical, what have they sold historically, we can do that. Maybe we'll set up a job every midnight to do a backup, a copy, and a restore to that secondary instance. And because that instance is readable, we can then configure the application that they use to run their reports to query that secondary SQL server, which is read-only, and it has no performance impact on our revenue-generating front-end application SQL server, which would be server A in this example. So we can separate those duties. We can have all the writes coming in off the web interface on server A, and then we can have all the read activities from the sales folks and all of their analytical information being serviced out of server B with no impact on each other. So that's just yet another example of scale out and where we would look to do that. So let's talk really quick about how log shipping works, and I already touched on it a little bit. Log shipping basically leverages what we call the magazine methodology. And basically what that is anytime you think of just that, a magazine company, maybe it's I don't know what's a magazine? I don't know, Time magazine or Sports Illustrated or anything like that. I don't even know if those are still around anymore. But basically you have to have your author or your publisher. So that's one role within SQL Server as a publisher. But then you've got the distributor. So maybe that's your local postal service, right? They're distributing the content from the author out to what we're going to refer to as number three as the um, subscribers. So we, as the consumer, we subscribe to these magazines, and they get delivered to our mailbox on our street. Maybe once a month or once every couple of weeks or whatever that subscription entails. So that's the methodology. Again, there's three. There's a publisher, a distributor, and a subscriber. And we'll talk through a little bit of that as we go through this demo. All right. Now, how it actually works, I guess I kind of skipped over that. So again, I've touched on this a little bit. Basically, it's a backup, it is a copy, and it is a restore. And I'll actually demo all of those for you here in just a minute. Okay. So so you're looking at my screen here, and let's talk about this. Let me kind of level set the environment here. So I've got a test environment that is running on one Windows Server 2012 R2 server running SQL Server 2012 Standard Edition with Service Pack 2. Now, this is probably not a typical environment for someone who is running something in production, but you'll see what I mean by that here in just a minute. So you'll see that we've got a server by the name of win-vbv, so on and so forth, right? It's just a randomly generated name that I let Microsoft create when I spun up this server. And you'll see that I've got two instances of SQL Server 2012 Standard Edition Service Pack 2 running on this one machine. Again, not something you'd probably do in production, but it's great for demos. If you ever have to set up a demo, you'll completely understand why. There's really nothing customized in here. It's their default installs, Windows authentication only. So let's actually dive into the demo. So the first thing we need to do is we need to identify which server is actually going to be our publisher. So in our case, we're going to leverage SQL 1 as our publisher. We're going to identify the database. So in our case, we've got the sample database here. The next thing we're going to do is I want to just give you kind of an idea of what's in the database. So let's go ahead. We've got our database selected. We're going to say new query. Okay. Again, we're just trying to level set so you guys can see the differences here. So you'll see on the left-hand side there is three tables. We're going to do a select star from app.sessions. And you'll see that we've got two entries there. We've got a identity column here on the left, and we've got a session ID and varchar type column here on the right named session ID. The next table we've got is going to be dbo.computers, and this actual table has just shy of 1 million rows in it, 999,999. And that was actually stemmed from a different demo, but nonetheless, we've got some content in our database, which is why I chose to leave it here. So we'll go ahead and let that finish. You'll see down bottom right hand corner we've got just shy of a million rows. And the content from the last table is going to be dbo.users, and you'll see we've got just 4 randomly generated users with an identity column here on the left. Okay, so again, small database, but we've got some content, and we'll go ahead and manipulate that to kind of prove out the log shipping mechanism. So now one of the first things that we have to do here is we have to take a backup of the database. We have to pre-seed it. There is a wizard that allows us to do this as part of the log shipping configuration or initiation, but I strongly recommend doing the backup restore via the method I'm going to show you. It's a little more clean cut, and you can understand kind of what's happening under the hood by doing it manually. So we're going to go ahead and right click on our database. In our case it's sample. We're going to go ahead and choose tasks and then backup. Everything in here should be left alone minus the location down here. We're going to go ahead and hit remove, hit add. We're going to go ahead and browse out to a folder that I pre-created called scripts, and I am going to create, let me just update this a little bit. It is August 1, so you'll see my naming convention here, and we'll actually get rid of this TRNBAK. So .bak. There we go. So we've got database sample underscore 2014-0801, just so happens to be August 1st today, .bak, which is a backup. Okay, we'll hit OK. We'll hit OK. Really nothing that we need to modify in the options. You know, if you feel like you need to adjust something there, feel free, but a default configuration should not require any modifications. We're going to go ahead and hit OK here. Bottom left-hand corner, you'll see percentages counting up. We now get a dialog box saying that the backup database sample completed successfully. We'll go ahead and hit OK to that. We are going to navigate down. Let's actually minimize this guy here. We're going to go ahead and connect to our SQL 2, which I already did, just using the connect database engine here. We're going to go ahead and scroll down to databases, and we are going to restore this database. We're going to go ahead and hit device. We are going to navigate to the backup that we just created in the scripts folder, sample underscore 2014-0801.bak. We're going to hit OK here. So you feel free to look through this stuff. Definitely understand what's going on. I'm not going to touch on every option here. A lot of this is pretty self-explanatory or intuitive. You know, our source is this BAK file here. Our destination is sample and whatnot. We are going to, because I'm running two instances in the same box, it's going to try and actually restore it back to SQL 1 instead of SQL 2. From a file system perspective, I'm going to go ahead and relocate all these files by checking this box. You'll see here that it actually tries to get it into the right location, which is 02, which is exactly what we want. Last thing we got to do is go to options. We are going to change the recovery state to restore with standby. Now I'm not going to go into all of the different options in here, but just one thing to note, look at this yellow bar here, and this yellow bar actually explains it pretty well. If you're not familiar or you're just doing this for the first time, I would strongly recommend going to do a little bit of research. Books online is really good for SQL, and they'll actually talk about this in great detail. But this yellow highlighted area here touches on it pretty well. Leave the database in read-only mode. Undo uncommitted transactions, but save the undo actions in a standby file so that recovery effects can be reversed. And you'll see the standby file location right here. Okay. All right. And we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And you'll see that in the upper right-hand corner, you get a progress bar here, and eventually we get a dialog that says database sample restored successfully. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK there. Now, if we actually scroll down here, you'll see that we've got a sample database. We've got it with a shade of gray here, which means it's in standby, and read-only. Right? You'll see that in the text there. So far so good. So now we've got our initial copy, our authoritative copy up on SQL 1, and we now have a standby read-only copy on SQL 2, but they are not linked. Next thing we got to do is establish log shipping. We're going to go ahead and minimize the SQL 2 instance, and we are going to go ahead and expand the SQL 1 instance. We're going to go up to database. We are going to right-click on our database and go to properties. In the left-hand pane, we're going to choose transaction log shipping. We're going to go ahead and enable this as the primary database. First thing we have to do is backup settings. Click the backup settings. So as I mentioned before, kind of going back to the beginning of this video, there's really a three-step process. It is going to back up the database, or the transaction logs rather. We're going to copy those, and then we are going to restore them. So the first thing that we need in our configuration is where do we store the backups? So I went ahead and I created a folder called REPL data. Now this will be empty the first time you do it. This is just from previous demos. I went ahead and created a folder C:\REPL data $, and I shared that out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to bring it into this field down here. Now if you read through these, this is the network path to backup folder. They're looking for a UNC path up here. Okay, if the backup folder is located on the primary server, type a local path to the folder. Okay, that's what we did here. This is the primary, therefore we're going to enter a local path. So let's go up here and let's go ahead and see if we can't get our UNC path. So this is actually shared from a previous demo. But our server, so it's whack or // when geez, backslash win dash VB, which is our server name, backslash REPL data dollar. Okay, we're going to go ahead and copy that. We're going to paste that in up here. Now look through these. Now I'm not going to change any of these for my demo, but understand what these are. So the first option we have here is delete files older than 72 hours. That's exactly what it sounds like. It will each file has an expiration. If the expiration is exceeded, it will go ahead and auto purge those files. So just know what that means. If no backup occurs within 1 hour, then it'll go ahead and do some alerting. And we'll talk about the monitoring server here at a very, very high level. I'll touch on it here shortly. And then we've got the job name, the backup job. Again, we've got 3 different jobs: backup, copy, restore. Okay, this one here, LS backup. LS stands for log shipping. Backup is the action, and sample is the database name. All right. If we go into schedule, you can see that we run it daily and every 15 minutes within that 1 day. Okay, it's a recurring and it's enabled. All right. And this description down here calls it out pretty well. Occurs every day, every 15 minutes between 12 a.m. and 11:59 p.m. Schedule will be used starting on 8/1/2014, which happens to be today. All right, we're not going to go ahead and change any of that. We're going to hit OK here. Next thing we have to do is define our secondary databases. These are our subscribers. So we're going to go ahead and hit Add. We are going to connect to our secondary server instance. We are going to change this to 2, and we are going to hit OK. We have options, and this is the window that I was talking about, or the options that I was talking about earlier. Do you want Management Studio to restore a backup into the secondary database? In our instance, we're going to say no. The secondary database is already initialized. That was the backup and restore that we did initially. You can choose yes, generate a full backup of the primary database and restore it to the secondary database, and create the secondary database if it doesn't already exist. Or you can say yes, restore an existing database of the yes, restore an existing backup of the primary database into the secondary database and create the secondary database if it doesn't exist. Or you can stick with the option we have down here, which is nope, we've already done it, so disregard. Next tab we're going to go to is copy files. This is the UNC path that we're looking for here. So we'll go ahead and grab that. We'll do paste. Delete copied files after 72 hours. Again, this is more of just a maintenance thing. All the data have an expiration date. When that expiration date is exceeded, we'll go ahead and purge those files out. And again, there's a schedule here, and it calls this out every 15 minutes for the entire day, starting on 8/1, which again happens to be today. And then, last but not least, we're going to restore the transaction log. So one of the things that is important to note around log shipping is that I mentioned earlier that the secondary databases are read-only. That is true. That is 100% true, with the exception of one thing: when the restore is happening. When the restore is happening, we have to kick all of the users out. We have to restore the database, and then we'll open that door again for connections. All right, and that's really what this is talking about. We need to say standby mode, and we need to say disconnect users in the database when restoring backups. It's very important. Now, there is scenarios where you may not want to choose this, but I'm not going to talk about those in any great detail today. However, again, do your research, understand what you're selecting. This video is intended to be a really quick snapshot of how to set up a simple, basic, what I would consider a traditional log shipping configuration. All right. So we got everything selected. Again, be aware of what your schedule looks like, and we're going to go ahead and hit OK. Last thing that we can choose, we're going to omit this today. We're not going to do it, but just know it's there. There is a monitor server instance that we can establish that will essentially monitor and take action on various things for alerting and whatnot. So just know that that's there. We're not going to touch on it today, but the option is certainly available if that's what you are interested in. So we're going to go ahead and commit the changes. We're going to click OK. It's going to go through and save the secondary destination and then the primary. We're going to hit close. We're going to minimize this, and we are in good shape thus far. So, as we looked at before, while we're on the publisher, we're going to go ahead and just take a snapshot of what data is in our app sessions table. Let's go ahead and actually make an adjustment because we want to obviously replicate something from server A to, or actually instance SQL 1 to instance SQL 2. So we're going to do insert into, and we're going to say app.sessions, and the column name is going to be session ID, and the values is going to be, we'll just kind of keep it consistent here with what we had going on before, session ID 3. So we'll go ahead and commit that. One row affected, which is good. We'll go ahead and we'll validate that we now have 3 entries in there, which is always good. So we've now made a change to the database. I want to show you something really quick before we move into kind of looking at and reviewing the various jobs that SQL has systematically set up for us. Okay, I want to show you some GUIDs because these GUIDs are going to pop up in these agent jobs, and I want you to understand where they're stemming from. So there is a stored proc called help log shipping primary database, and we're going to say database equals sample. So let's take a look at this really quick. Oh, we got to be in the master. Let's switch our view to master, and here we go. So what you'll see here is that there's a primary ID. So when log shipping gets established, an ID gets associated with that instance. Okay, and again, we're specifying in our parameters the database sample. So we've got a primary ID, we've got a primary database, which is sample. We got our backup directory. Again, this is the configuration around log shipping. So make note of this stored procedure. Our backup share, our retention period, our backup compression, our backup job ID, our monitor server, security mode, backup threshold, threshold alert enabled, right? All these different settings are in here, okay? Make note of this AB6, okay? So let's actually do something. Let's see here. Let's just move on to the agents, and then we'll touch base on this very similar type approach onto the secondary here in just a minute. So like I mentioned just a minute ago, we've got various jobs that were systematically created as part of the log shipping wizard that we just stepped through. And while we're on the SQL 1, which happens to be our publisher, you'll notice that 2 jobs were set up. There was an alert job and a backup job. Let's focus on the backup job here for a minute. If we right click and go to properties, and we go to steps, and we go to edit, you'll see that the backup is nothing more than just a execution of a SQL logship.exe file. And it leverages a switch or a parameter of backup, and then you'll see that this GUID, this is that GUID I was just showing you in that table. And then we specify the server and then obviously the instance, right? So we're saying take a backup of on this server of a database with this GUID. Okay, so that's what that is. So we're going to actually go ahead and initiate that. We're going to say start job at step. And our database is relatively small, so we're going to go, this flies through pretty quick. So we've got successes, green check marks. We'll go ahead and hit close. We'll scroll down. We will then connect to the second instance. We will refresh our job. And you'll see that there is 3 jobs that were created, the alert, the copy, and the restore. So let's do something very similar to what we did above and try to identify our GUIDs. So again, we're going to do execute sp help log shipping, and then we're going to see secondary database, and we're going to say secondary database equals sample. And you will now see the configuration for the secondary database. We've got the secondary ID, the GUID. We've got a primary server, backup. Something. A lot of this is very familiar or very similar to what we had above. Okay, with a bit more parameters here. All right. So as we look at, we're going to focus on just the copy and the restore for now. If we look at the copy agent job here, and we go to steps and we go to edit, you're going to see that we're executing the exact same command, SQL logship.exe, but now we're leveraging the copy parameter with that GUID. This is that same GUID. You'll see it kind of in the background here, 4473BADF, 4473BADF, which is our unique identifier, right? Our GUID. And then we're specifying the server, which in our case now is SQL 2. All right. So we're going to go ahead and cancel out of these. We're going to go ahead and execute this job. Start job at step. It's now initiating the copy. And now the final step, again, 3-step process, backup, copy, restore. We're now on the restore step. We're going to look at steps. We're going to do edit. And again, you're going to see that we're leveraging that same command line, or executable, SQL log ship. And now we're using the restore parameter. And now look at, we've got that same GUID specified in the same server. So a lot of the intelligence is baked into this executable. We'll cancel out of these, and we will actually, we'll do a restore, start job at step. All right, so it finished. So the next thing that we're going to do is I want to show you or prove to you that the changes were replicated from the principal, or from the publisher rather, down to the subscriber. Now remember, one of the options that we chose was to disconnect all users on restore. So if I go here and I say select star from app.sessions, you're going to see, let's get you into that wrong. Oh, it's because I hit the, sorry, bad example. So I hit the execute, which auto reconnects. If I hit F5, it'll throw an error saying that you're disconnected. But anyways, so we're reconnected, and now you'll see that there is a ID 3 here down at the bottom that we inserted from the publisher. So that in a nutshell is how log shipping works. Log shipping, again, is very easy, very simple, very consistent, and it generally requires very little to any hand-holding once it's deployed. Okay. One thing that I would mention is that a lot of people will try to kind of create a strategy around the timing of these agent jobs. So what I see a lot of is I see a lot of individuals doing the backups on maybe the even minute and the copy on the odd minute, and then the restores on the even minute again. Or maybe their restores are the 2-minute mark, right? It just, everybody has a little bit of different strategy, but that just, again, kind of goes back to your RPO, RTO, and what your requirements are for recovery, whether this is a HA type approach or if this is more of a scale out, back to that sales environment that I was talking about before. So I hope this video was informational. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you for your time.